and our hearts go together. One the action for the other. Blood carries our emotions, expresses our sense of self, carries the essence of our nature. Blood is life. I know this because blood carries the life-giving gases of oxygen and carbon dioxide that we interchange with the Earth's biosphere. Blood affirms our relationship with everything and all things. Blood is life. I know this because the protection of the circulation of blood remains the priority of doctors, paramedics and first aiders. To save a life means the same today as it did before the advent of human blood transfusions in the 19th century. To stem the flow of blood when a vessel is cut or ruptured remains the key priority in saving life. Blood is life. I know this because to replace the lost blood as a result of trauma or surgery makes all the difference. The surgeons, no matter how skilled, could not have saved my life without the blood transfusions I received during the numerous operations I underwent. Blood is life. I know this because someone, somewhere, saved my life, because they gave their blood. Without that gift, I would not live, I would not love, I would not breathe, not have this rebirth, this previous life that I lived. Blood is life. So that's my little homage to healthcare, because I intimately understand what it means to have a life saved, in this case my life. I dread to think how much I've cost healthcare over the course of 14 years, because I'm still engaged as a patient with long-term health conditions after that initial life saving that took place on 2002 September. So what I'm saying here is, how do we begin to find spaces to actually understand this real, meaningful sense of what health is about? Because it affects lives. Ultimately, a healthcare professional's experience is based on my experience of them. The one person who doesn't get a choice in that is me, as a patient or a carer. It's very difficult to actually change your healthcare professional, be they a doctor or a nurse. It's incredibly difficult. When I rolled into A&E in Scarborough, bleeding to death and expected to be DOA, I couldn't go, excuse me, but I need another crash team, thank you. I don't like the tie that guy's wearing, I've got no choice. Yeah, and most of the time, actually, as patients and carers, we have very little choice. We have to trust who we get and the service that we get. So that means that for those people who are executives and in strategic positions, they need to understand that the decisions that they make that affect doctors, nurses, healthcare assistants, who do the job of looking after me and many others, has a severe impact on my experience. You cannot disconnect yourselves, even though you have to think about systems and processes and budgets and sustainability and transformation. You can never lose sight of the fact that what this is about me and others. But it is ultimately about me and my experience. And believe me, and I don't wish this on anyone, if crisis happens and you are dependent on a nurse and a doctor at that very moment of your greatest adversity, then it will really come crashing in to you, the reality of what this is about. This is about healthcare service. Yeah? So, who defines who? Am I simply a patient? in one sense, yes. But I'm also someone who can actually give you immediate tacit feedback as to what's going on as well. And what's so heartening is in my patient journey, even when I was in A&E and in the theatre in pre-op, doctors and nurses were doing their level best to involve me in the whole process of what was going on, even though they basically got to save my life at the same time. So they took great care to ensure that I understood what was going on as far as I could, and get my consent to the operations that were pending, and the eventual amputation of my leg, and all the various other injuries that were going to have to be resolved. Healthcare professionals do the best that they can with the support that they're given by the people who run healthcare, and they do a bloody good job where they can, but mistakes are made, and often we get lost in translation. And I think a lot of the problems that we face in healthcare, and particularly with the patient-public experience, is translation of language and jargon into real life. It's about definition and who makes the definition. It's about who does the talking and who does the listening. Maybe sometimes we need to swap roles every now and again, and the people who are doing the talking maybe do more of the listening. So this is a poem about definition. You want me to be like you, not different? Not remind you that life is contingent? To make you feel uncomfortable in your skin? Not remind you that wholeness is not physical, but the great invisible? Not remind you that the body does not define the boundary of self? Not remind you that all that is material is not being? You want me to be like you, but I'm not. I'm just going to have to put up with that, sorry. But that's the difficulty. I'm not a difficult patient. I'm a great patient. I want to work with healthcare providers, I want to work with clinical leaders, I want to work with senior directors to help the health service be amazing, because the health service changed my life. So this isn't a pointing finger, and this isn't a bat to beat people over with. It's an invitation for dialogue and conversation. And I think one of the great areas where we can do this is through arts and humanities, because that pulls everyone out of the discourse of biomedical science in systems and processes and transformation, and we actually begin to meet people as individuals and human beings. And again, we find that space where we realise that actually we're the same, and we have the same goals and aspirations. So I'm going to finish with one more poem, and then we've got maybe 5 minutes to have a talk if you want, raise questions, disagree. Let me see if I can find this. So I was commissioned by the School of Medicine at the University of Leeds to do an arts project with Year 2 students and people and carers who live with dementia. And it was a really scary experience for the students, because we pulled them clearly out of their biomedical area and put them in an arts and humanities domain. What happened though was amazing, because all of a sudden the barriers that were extant while in the biomedical discourse were removed, and all of a sudden we had this open dialogue going on between people with dementia, the carers of people with dementia, and the future healthcare professionals. And it was amazing. And this was one of the poems that came out of it. It's called The Space Between. It's kind of encapsulating what I'm suggesting here, which is, if we recognise that there's this space between us, how are we going to fill it up? How are we going to meet one another? So, the space between. See this space between us? this gap that cleaves us. Parts and gathers, flotsam and jetsam, arise, a fall, again and again. See the delicacy with which we approach one another. You from there, me from here. Appearances deceiving, disappearances regretting. Things not said, all said. Hopes and fears glimpsed. I think I see it now, this flash of light. Yes, I see a school of thoughts turning, just there. I think I see it now more clearly, this sharing space between us. All we've got to do is create the space for dialogue, conversation and partnership, and you'll get to hear what you need to hear. All you've got to do is create the space. So my name's Phil Sheridan. Once again, thank you to Zoe for inviting me, and thank you for being a very lovely audience. I've got 5 minutes, I think. So if anyone has any questions about this or just wants to have a conversation about this, then hey, let's do it.
I'd like to ask you